Joel, just got to do a bit of admin quickly. Just wait for you, Joel.
Admin? I'm just getting my notes ready. So actually, this is how a professional does it.
Oh, right here.
Jeez, we're going back to the
I thought
beef.
you like to wing it, Joel.
Well, I'm an angel, so I've got wings. I've got the voice of an angel and the looks of Adonis. Welcome back to the Chip Lunch Podcast. It is fantastic to have you along with us, and I'm fantastic. I feel fantastic because I have two amazing people along with me for the ride. I am joined again by another repeat appearance here by Gemma, which is pretty cool.
I think we should start keeping a tally, maybe.
No, this is 3. You've been on 3 so far.
Yeah.
So
but I'm like, you know.
You mean a
Catching
tally
up.
between the two of you?
No.
we haven't introduced you yet. Sure.
No.
Excuse me. We're going to have host battles.
Yeah, host battles.
Host battle.
You definitely really got quite an advantage on the host battles.
Being what?
Well, you've got way more experience.
Being a beast.
Yeah, being a beast.
Right.
I've got quite a bit of catching up to do, but we'll see what happens.
Fantastic. Well, I'm Joel, by the way. This is Gemma.
I was like, are you trying to introduce Alhana
No,
or me?
I'm thinking of Alhana, but I need to say
Yeah.
you're Gemma.
I'm Gemma.
Because I haven't introduced you. Do you want to introduce our guest for today?
And this is Alhana. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on.
Thank you.
It's great. to
I'm
have
very
you.
excited.
Well, it's the Chip Lunch Podcast.
Yes.
We always like to ask the very, very same question every single time
Fair
at
enough.
the very beginning.
Yep,
Yeah.
fair enough.
How do you like to have your hot chips?
So Gemma and I had a very brief discussion about this.
Yes.
Without me.
So I'm very,
Very,
passionate
very
about
brief.
This course.
It depends on the type of hot chip. If it's the ones coming from a fish and chip shops, chicken schultz. Chicken schultz.
Chicken shelf. It's chicken from the shelf.
Chicken salt all the way for the ones that come from fish and chip shop.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it's got to be normal salt. So like any other fries, it's just
Like French fries.
like
or-
French fries or like even just like any other hot chips.
Okay, I have a really quick question.
Okay.
What about a chicken shop?
Well,
Because they make chickens. and
They
the
make
chicken salt.
chickens.
no,
So-
it's chicken salt too. It's
Okay,
chicken
good,
salt.
good,
Okay.
good. I back that.
Any takeaway shop like a chicken shop or a fish and chip shop, it's got to be chicken
Good,
salt.
good.
So is that like a half point for chicken salt and a half point for normal salt, if that's the
Well,
case?
where else do you get your chips? That's not a chicken shop or a fish and chip shop where you'd be asking for what type of salt you want. I feel like most other
A
places.
pub.
Yeah, but the pub just
True.
chooses the salt for you.
Oh.
Or if you get
That's
like
true.
the bags of chips and you just cook them at home, then you decide what salt you want.
You can decide at home.
Yeah.
Like
Bit
the
of a-
frozen bags.
Yeah.
Yeah, frozen.
Yeah.
You
Come
can
on,
crack
guys.
a bit
Make
of,
your own chips. So lazy. I'll
called
just buy it from the
late-night snacking.
supermarket.
chuck them in the air fryer. No.
Oh, air fryer. The
Nice and
number one
crunchy.
appliance of lockdown.
Oh, I love my air fryer.
The air fryers are pretty good.
Have you both got air fryers?
I got my dad one for his birthday
Oh,
last
you must have
year.
been stoked.
I think you're more stoked about it.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I haven't used it once. Dad uses it for roasts. He uses it for chips. He uses it for just about anything he can. And Mum absolutely hates washing it up. But
Little insight into the Calder family.
well, it's a big appliance.
Yeah.
Is it? How big is it?
Well, we've got like a big one.
You
Wow.
got a box one?
Yeah,
I've got a box one too.
because
What's the
I
I don't even know
So
the
there's,
difference.
wait,
is
does yours have like a door where you
Yes.
like open it? It's like kind of like a mini oven.
yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So there's ones that look like a little tiny oven.
Right.
And there's ones that are like those like egg shaped like ones with a little drawer that you
Which is what I
pull
have.
out.
And that's like a poor man's air fryer.
No,
No,
not
that's
poor
like
man's.
the top of the line.
Oh,
ones.
that's the good one.
Yeah, they're the good
Yeah.
ones.
the goodies.
Yeah, we got my dad the good one.
You got the egg shape one.
Yeah,
Or
the egg shaped one. It's like
It's
the
a
biggest
big-
one you can
oh,
get.
Yeah, you can
Right.
get a big egg shape or like a little egg shape or like one that looks like a little oven.
there
There's
you
quite
go.
a variety of air fryers.
So what? So can you air fry anything? Is that basically what they're
Yeah.
saying? And because it's
much.
healthier than frying it in oil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Right.
it's also not just like things that you would fry. It's
You can,
things
like, bake stuff.
Yeah, it's like it's pretty much an oven in a lot of ways. Like as I said, my dad's done a roast chicken in it and roast beef. We do weekly roast dinners at my house,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
he does. The roast potatoes don't turn out well, which for anyone who does know my family is a little bit of a letdown because we really love our potatoes.
Oh, it's like potatoes is a
Roast
family
potatoes
thing.
are a really big thing. So I go over to Jacob's house, my boyfriend's house, and I do consistently get paid out in a very loving way by his family for, if I've had my allotted potato amount, because we're so keen on our potatoes that we have a specific amount to the point where I think the first time Jacob came over for dinner when my sister was around, my sister made sure he had his allotted amounts, and he was a bit like,
I just want some
Like,
potatoes.
have you
man.
got 5 pieces? I've got 5 pieces.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
You know
Yeah.
what? And I actually started that thing with my wife's family because my father-in-law cooks very nice baked potatoes, and I would eat too many, and so and like because she's a family of 5. It's very much like, no, you've eaten too much, Joel.
And you don't want to be that like partner that like goes to their like partner's family's house and like eats all the food. Like it's a bit
Yeah.
awkward.
And like keeps going over for dinner and eating all the food.
Yeah, you don't want to be that.
Anyway, we got sidetracked, guys.
yeah, sorry.
Thanks for the air fry chat.
Air fryers are
And the
really
potatoes.
good.
Is it like the new version of the microwave?
I think I
Yeah.
would say yeah.
Okay.
Although I've never had a microwave, so I also can't fully comment. But
Would you replace a microwave with an air fryer?
I would.
no.
We've got a microwave and an air fryer, and I feel like I use the air fryer
you're like
more.
microwave's out on the cleanup pile next month.
Except it's the microwave is good for like heating up like I don't know like liquids. You can't do that in the air fryer if that makes sense.
You do it in a saucepan, bro.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, you can do it in a saucepan, but it's like not as quick. Anyway, I don't have a debate about microwaves.
One of my favorite things about lockdown, before we get on to you, Alhana, we'll make it about us for a second.
Yeah,
if we haven't already.
Host wars.
Yeah, classic wars.
Oh, it's going to be fun.
One of my favorite things is like not having to microwave my lunch.
Oh,
So
yeah.
because I'm working from home, I get it out of the fridge. It's in like a Pyrex container. Put the oven on, put it on, and it's just much more
Fresh.
enjoyable experience.
Mm.
It's not soggy.
Yeah, when something can be crunchy, when it's meant to be crunchy,
Yep.
life is good, I feel.
Life is good.
Yeah.
That's right. Anyway, back to Alhana.
Yes.
Thanks for coming on the Chip Lunch podcast.
No worries.
I
I'm really
would-
happy to be here.
I would love you to chat about how you became a Christian.
So I grew up in a non-Christian family. It wasn't, I'm trying to think. I kind of went to scripture in school. Like my parents were never wanting to take me out of scripture. With my sister and I, they were always like, it's up to you guys to make your own decision about if you want to be religious in any way and that sort of thing. So we just basically went to standard Protestant scripture.
Is that at a government school?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So I went to public schools all throughout school. And I do have very vivid memories of being in like year 5 and 6 and watching Veggie Tales in scripture in primary school.
Iconic.
And loving it. And it was like a whole bunch of the non-Christian kids who like really thrived on it. It was really strange.
Yeah, I didn't know about VeggieTales until like over 18.
Yeah, I was just, it was just such a strange thing. And it was only we'd watch it like end of term scripture lessons. That was it. But we always got really keen to watch VeggieTales by the end. And I'm talking like 12-year-olds.
It's like the equivalent of watching a movie at the end of the term.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
But
It
it's
is.
the scripture
For
version.
scripture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were like, we don't want to do scripture lessons. We'll watch the talking vegetables.
Did you have a favourite veggie?
I do not remember. I do remember.
It was a potato.
I don't think there was a potato on Veggie Tales.
I don't know.
don't
See,
think
that's
so.
how
Correct me if
little
I'm
I know
wrong,
it.
but I don't think there is.
Okay.
The only thing I remember is the Where's My Hairbrush song. That is the only thing that's
Yeah.
coming to mind now. And we used to sing it in the playground. Like we were super dorky. So for like reference, I went to smart selective high school and went to like a selective class in year 5 and 6. So we were all the biggest bunch of nerds that you could find, and like
So funny.
grew up with a very nerdy family as well. So we were not ashamed of being dorks in the playground by this point. So yeah, went through high school, and in year 9, I was about halfway through year 9, I had a friend who was a Christian. We were just walking to school one day for band practice in the morning, and
What instrument did you play?
I played flute, trombone, tuba. I also did a little bit of piano.
This is impressive.
And I did choir for a while, but then it clashed with jazz ensemble, and then it clashed with flute ensemble. So I was like, yeah, nah.
A lot of ensembles.
Were you a nerd or a music nerd?
I think a bit of both.
I was in I think you can attest I was an everything nerd. Because I was
The best kind.
Yeah. Like the only reason I picked up tuba was in year 9, there was this dinged up old tuba in our music store. I'm sorry, I'm going off topic here. And it's like dinged up old. There's like this blue fluff in it, which we think might have been cancerous. And it was really bad. Anyways, and I'd been starting trombone lessons, and we were like, we don't have a tuba player. So I learnt tuba from my trombone teacher. And then the next year I ended up in the top music ensemble because there was no other tuba players. And that was how I started learning tuba. I was awful at it, but it was the most fun thing I've ever played, except for when I accidentally inhaled through the tuba and I started having a coughing fit. And so the band would stop and I'd be dying, and my conductor would just be like, what are you doing? And my friend next to me, who knew exactly what had happened, is just laughing his head off at me.
Really?
Yeah. So anyways, we were walking to school. And
Sorry, I'm still on the musical instrument. Do you play a musical instrument now?
I do not.
Why not?
I pretty much did the usual stop after high school. Yeah, which is unfortunate because I have a really nice flute at home, and I still have my trombone at home. It's not as nice as my flute, but it's still at home. And I just haven't played it. And I have thought about doing like piano or something, but also I have no space for a piano in my house. So I'm like, doesn't quite work. But yeah.
Well, all I hear is excuses, but
Well,
It's
yeah.
interesting how that
Not
happens.
really,
So you
but-
just kind of like drop stuff after high school. You're like, see ya, done with that.
But I think you'd actually really enjoy it if you went back to it anyway.
Oh, yeah,
To
I
encourage you, sorry. Let's go back. You were walking with your friend in year 9.
Yeah,
is that right?
so 2 friends to school, and my friend who was a Christian was actually talking to another one of my friends, and at her church she was having, for youth group later that week, they were having this big invite a friend night to church, and I believe Gemma remembers the night. We didn't meet on said night, but she was there. And so she was talking to him, and I had my earbuds in because by this point I was like a very quiet individual person. I kind of just got in a bit of a shell in high school, like around year 8 up until probably like year 11 even. And so I would just most of the time have headphones in at school, in all honesty. And so she was telling him about this thing and getting him really keen and everything. And I just kind of overheard and took my earphone out. And I was just like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. Can I come too? And she was like, yeah, sure. She was absolutely gobsmacked. Because even when I talk to her to this day, she's like, I never expected that you would come. You were one of the last people I was ever intending on asking because I never thought that you would come, which is quite ironic in the end. So I went, and it was a very big youth night. There were like 200 kids there, and I am very introverted, and when I don't know people, I just close up even more. So I was a bit overwhelmed. But we sat down that night for the talk, and the talk was on 1 John chapter 4 verses 7 to 12, which is
this is what we're doing that for church this week.
yes. So so it was on that, which it was so crazy. And basically in that it talks about God loved us well before we have ever known him, well before we were born. And because of that, we should love other people. And I kind of just got really amazed that there was someone who loved us despite us not knowing him. And I just kind of got really interested. So this was like the last night of term as well. So I ended up going home. I remember actually going home and praying like all through those holidays, but I would not say I was a Christian at the time because I don't think I properly understood the full extent of what Jesus dying meant for me. But I went back to youth after that, which was really cool. I was doing dancing lessons on a Friday night and I stopped going to dancing lessons so I could go to Bible study. And my mum was really confused because she was like, you're dropping all these things to do this church stuff. And I was like, well, it interests me. And I was starting to make some really good friends there as well. And then probably about 9 months later, I had been... the church I was at had their youth camp, but I'd been overseas in Japan that whole time, which was a massive bummer because I was really keen for this camp, but I didn't get to go.
Playing tuba?
No, this was no, the camp was a youth camp, and overseas was just.
No, I meant you were overseas playing tuba.
No, I was just overseas because I was doing Japanese, and we went to Japan.
Yeah.
So
That's pretty epic though.
oh, it was so much fun. Like, I do not regret going to Japan over youth camp. But I would have enjoyed going to youth camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was like the week after this youth camp, and I just happened to go to church because I was like to my parents, I have missed seeing all my friends. They've all been getting to hang out. And it was school holidays as well. So I was like, I really want to go to church. So I was like, yeah, okay. So I went to church and it was something from Titus that was being read. I cannot remember for the life of me now what it was. But that was kind of then that I really understood what Jesus' sacrifice meant. And I was just very overwhelmed. Could very much feel that that I had the Holy Spirit with me at that time, and that I was kind of like, no, this is that turning point. I want to give my life to Jesus. Like, I want to follow him and I want to love others because he's died for our sins. So yeah, that happened, and it was a really big adjustment for a bit. I ended up being pretty open about being a Christian in high school, which was really good. And being a Christian in a public school is one thing. Being a Christian in a public selective school, I would argue, is another.
Why is that?
Because rather than, and not saying this doesn't happen to other kids in public schools, but I guess rather than maybe your typical getting paid out or rude comments or anything like that for being a Christian, you start, particularly when you're like 16, 17, you start having actually very reasonable, big conversations about Christianity and religion and life. Yeah. And at the time as well, a big thing that was happening was the same-sex marriage debate. That referendum was kind of around that time. So it was very often, I remember walking home from school one time with a couple of friends, one who is still Christian as well, and one who wasn't. And he was just asking us these really big questions, and we were just like, he'd been a Christian for much longer than me, so he was able to answer a bit more, but it was just, there was so many bigger questions and that were just really challenging to kind of just think through, which I think it was terrifying at the time, but it was also really, really cool because one, it challenged me to learn, like to keep learning more at a time when, you know, with not having Christian family at home, I very easily could just not read my Bible, pray or anything like that, and not have things keeping me accountable at home. So I kind of had those people asking those big questions keeping me accountable. But it was also just really cool to get to learn, I guess very early on in my faith, how to have those like have big open conversations while also being very respectful of other people's opinions. So yeah, and like that kind of followed through with leading school Christian group at school, which was really cool. And gradually over time, I think I kind of opened up out of my shell as well, which was really awesome. So I think I was about 16 and I had found myself a really good group of friends, and they were a group of friends through church, and was like so over the moon happy that we ended up just having something super hilarious happen, and we discovered my signature laugh. Like, and I had no idea this happened, and it's basically a combination of like a dolphin or a dog squeaky toy. Like my dog reacts to my laugh. It's hilarious. She thinks it's one of her toys.
Wow.
And that kind of gradually started to happen at school as well, kind of opening up, because I guess I felt, I actually felt like I was loved. Even if I did struggle with relationships in school, I always knew that I was loved by God, and He'd created me in the way that He had, and that I should be open and proud to being who that person is. So yeah, that's kind of school things. I don't know if you want me to keep going.
That's fine. But how was it hard? Like you said, you became a Christian after hearing, was that talk on Titus?
That was when I decided to become a Christian, like made that conscious decision, yeah.
Was it hard, like, you're coming out as a Christian? Because you said it was reasonably easy to have conversations at school.
I think by that point, people already knew I was going to youth group.
Yeah.
And so I think often the assumption that's made is if you're going to youth group, you're a Christian. And maybe more so with my group of friends as well. So it wasn't so much hard with that respect. I think it was mostly an assumption-based thing, because even with my family, I don't think I ever properly got asked. They were just kind of like...
Just assumed.
Yeah. And as I said, they were kind of shocked at first that I was going to church and going to youth. And it took them a long while to kind of get that that's what I was doing. And they might still not entirely get it to this day, which is totally fine. But yeah, I guess the actual coming out as a Christian wasn't so hard. Yeah.
That's cool. Something also I heard you saying, and it's something that we talk a lot about on this podcast, is the way that Jesus changes our identity. And a lot of it, and often it comes like God does that through obviously Jesus dying on the cross, but then also the way that other people love us, because that's my story. And talking about Tamanda last week, it was the same thing. We were put into an arena or an environment where people actually loved us for who we are. So that helps us discover our true identity. Was that the case for you, do you think? Because you talked about coming out of your shell.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that sentiment. Like I do have really good friends that I had made through high school, but in our grade of like 160 people, there's now probably about 10 that I still speak to on a regular basis, and that regular basis is once every 12 months pretty much, outside of one person that I go to church with still. And so yeah, like it took a while to come out of my shell, but I definitely think being around people who were willing to love me for me and not to try and put me in a box, because kind of with how our social setting happened at school.
Yeah, love this.
Yeah, was this is what you were fishing for, was it a little bit?
Not always. Just I just like it when people start talking about where their situation was, because it's always really different.
Yeah.
But then the story about Jesus is always the same.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'd kind of gone from like one very small, close group of friends in like year 7 and 8, and then kind of tried to branch out because some things had happened. And I went to go to kind of the popular group, which I found out about 2 years later that there were people who felt really sorry for me because they could tell that I really didn't fit in there. And I really didn't fit in. Like, I knew it. Everyone knew it. But they didn't want to, they were like, well, she can get herself out of it. So there wasn't really a thought of, you know, coming and checking in. And so I kind of came out of that probably partway through year 9 as well. So around the same time that I was also going to church, and the rest of our year group, there was like this one spot outside the library where there was probably in the mornings before school, probably a combination of like 5 or 6 different groups all came and hung out together really. And then from there, there was like those 6 kind of individual groups that had closer friends to each other that kind of branched out in later parts of the day. And so I kind of was one of the floaters between those groups, or just sat on my own within that big group of people. So yeah, it was kind of coming from that where I didn't really have a place, I guess, to then coming into this environment where I had people who were genuinely interested in who I was, which I didn't know who I was at the time. So that was fun figuring that out. And like really interested in keeping up with me, keeping contact with me. And these are all people that I didn't go to school with as well, which was really cool. And even like there was a time when I kind of did fall away a little bit from youth because I was friends with a lot of people in the year above. And so in year 11, I had a little bit of a freak out because I was like, oh no, all of them are leaving church. Well, leaving youth. You know, I'm not going to be seeing them as often and that sort of thing. So I had a bit of a freak out and started going to a few other youth groups, and then kind of just stopped going to youth in general. And then I got a message from a girl in my grade, Fee, who I had not thought we were that close friends, but I just got a message from her and she was like, hey, we haven't seen you like at all this term. We really miss you and hope everything's going okay. And I was kind of just like, whoa, like
someone cares about me.
I know. Yeah. And that was a big show of God's love as well, I think. Through Fee was just kind of, she had seen someone who was struggling or wasn't around, and she was like, I'm going to check in. And yeah, from there, I then ended up coming back and then making really good friends with the people of my own grade, like Gemma here.
I've been hogging all the questions. You got any questions for Alhana?
Oh, I guess I was actually going to ask about when you did start going to youth group, and you kind of had to drop a few things. You kind of touched on a little bit how that kind of went down, like with your fam. Not sure how cool you are to like share, but like was there any kind of like, I guess, challenge or like barriers in like trying to be a Christian in a family that's not Christian?
Yeah. I mean, at first it was, as I said, it was a bit of a surprise to my parents. And I think at the time it was just my mum and I and my sister in the house, because my dad did a lot of work interstate as well. And so mum was doing all the driving everywhere. And so at the time she was driving to Sylvania for dance, to then pick me up from there to drive me to Barton Ridge.
Wow.
For church, for youth, and then to drive me home from there after youth.
These are all locations in the Sutherland
Yes,
Shire,
yes. Should probably say that, yeah.
But it's like a 20-minute.
Yeah, it's a 20,
25 minutes.
Yeah, between those two, but then also from my house, it's about 15, 20 minutes to each of those locations. And so I think in part, mum was happy at first both happy that I was dropping dance, because then she didn't have to drive me as many places. But also she was a bit like, she was kind of hesitant because she went, well, you haven't been going to this thing for very long. Like, you might regret it further down the line. And I was like, yeah, but this is something that I want to do.
My parents were a bit like that too.
Yeah. And so she kind of came through with it. But I think the bigger trouble with it was trying to get to church. So I never really became a regular church goer, like Saturday, Sunday, anything like that, until I graduated high school, really, because my parents didn't want to drive out to wherever 2 nights a week, which I totally understand because I didn't also get my license until I graduated. So
I actually remember when you got your license. That was like a big yes.
It was a really big
I was
thing.
really stoked about it.
Then you had a crash when you got to church.
No, not quite.
I'm here.
Oh,
Hi everyone.
actually, I think I remember that the first week I was at church that I had my license, there was also like some 18th that I had planned to go to after church, and then I was like, nah, I'm at church. I don't want to go to that 18th now. I'm staying here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that for a while kind of, because I really, really wanted to go to church. And so it kind of took me some time to be okay with not going because I realized it was the best way to love my parents in that time, because they were still, like, my dad's totally cool with it, really. My mum is totally cool with it as well. They're kind of just like, we support your decision, but we don't really want to hear about it, if that makes sense. Yeah. So like they were happy to come to things like my baptism, but they're not necessarily always keen on hearing about Jesus and that sort of thing, which I understand. So yeah, at the time that was kind of my thing of, okay, I'll just go to youth because that's the best thing for, like, that's the best way to love my parents. And at the moment, I think at the time as well, I was doing some serving at youth as well. So I was doing some ministry stuff there. I was doing some ministry stuff at school. And I thought the best way of to be discipled was at youth rather than at church for Saturday nights. So I thought for kind of all those reasons, sticking with youth was best. I had another thing in my head. What was it? I actually no. I do remember when I started coming to Soul Revival. That was when the discussion then came up again about doing Friday night youth and Saturday night church, but they were in different places, and late night went until like all hours of the night. So there was a bit of discussion there and kind of some compromise, but I ended up having some really awesome friends who were happy to give me a lift home, which was very wonderful and loving of them, particularly because I'd had an experience only like 6 or 12 months earlier where I'd had a friend who, and the reason I didn't get my license for so long was I was just petrified of driving for a bit. All those safe driving courses that they get you to do to like make you aware of all the dangers, they just scared the life out of me, and I was just like, no, I'm not doing it.
Too far.
Pretty much.
Yeah, sorry about the crash comment before. My bad.
And I just had this one friend who was giving me a lift home. He's like, you know, you're really going to have to get your license someday because you don't want to turn out like that friend who always expects lifts from people. And I was like,
that's brutal.
But I was, at the time, this guy was giving me a lift home, and I was like, I've only asked as to help my parents out. My parents are still happy to pick me up. It's just you live in my general area and like go the same direction home. So that was a bit of a
But
falling
you become
out.
that person to him already. That's what he's basically saying to you.
He had another friend who had become that, and he's like, you don't want to become this friend,
Don't
and
be that
named the
guy.
friend. And I was just like, okay. And there was a little bit of a falling out with that friend, which was unfortunate. But yeah, so I'd kind of already had all of that happen. So the fact that I had friends who were offering me lifts home was really wonderful, and it was
as a
great.
contrast to that, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they were like, so I guess in summary, I never so much had boundaries with regards to my parents or friends being opposed to me being religious and to me being Christian. It was more physical boundaries of actually getting places to then actually continue learning more. So yeah.
Yeah.
I had another thought on that. Is that all right if I slide in? I already know this because we are good friends, and but I feel like your transition from you mentioned that group of friends that were the year above you, and when they kind of graduated and left youth group, I'd be really keen to hear more about like how that transition kind of went, and then when you came back to youth, and then kind of what happened post school for you. I feel like that's like a really
That was my next question. Anyway.
It's a really good story, Joel.
Oh, great.
oh gosh.
Please,
okay.
let's go.
Well, I just think it's really cool.
Now I'm hoping I live up to the story.
No,
okay.
you will. You'll be fine.
So I came back to youth, and at the time I was going to youth at a different church. And so I came back to youth, and I kind of came back with the mentality of, okay, well, the people that I'm close friends with, yes, they're leaving youth group, but I already have a couple of friends that I do go to school with that I am really close with. And I was already in a Bible study as well. And I was like, maybe I just need to kind of reset my mind frame about this and just go into it and make the best of it. And I'm really glad that I did, because I ended up becoming really good friends with Gemma and Katie out of it, because
It's a really good story.
No, I actually remember, like just really quickly, I remember chatting with you when you had come back and kind of talking about that group of people that had left. And I actually remember having a conversation about how you were feeling about it. And I think like our Bible study, I think it was really clear when you kind of had gone, okay, I actually want to make the most of hanging with this group of people, because really like beautiful relationship came out of that. And I think we wouldn't have really been friends if that didn't happen. Like I think that was kind of a big, but yeah, that it is a good story because of that. But also there are other parts of it that are good.
Yes, let's hear them.
So I just kind of went, I'm just going to make the best of it, and kind of just really invested in the people that were in my grade, and a little bit in the grades kind of below. As I said earlier, I was kind of doing some ministry stuff through youth. We had a student squad.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It was pretty fun. Student squad.
No, I'm just shortening it. Is it? Sorry, what school did you go to? Do you mind?
I went to Carringbar.
I thought so.
Yes.
Because you said it was a selective school.
Yeah.
The elite.
The elite government school.
So not elite. So far from it.
What was I going to make my question?
Lost it.
I have. Completely lost it because I was making funny jokes.
It's all right, we got the banter in.
Oh, so you went to that school. So the student squad was at school?
No, the student squad
youth
was
group.
at youth. And then I was doing a separate ministry at school, which was called Generator, although I don't believe it's still called Generator. Have to ask someone else for that one.
Okay.
So I was leading that with a couple of people who I was actually, everyone in my grade, there was 4 of us, including myself, and we were all going to youth group together. So it actually worked out really well that we were leading that at school.
And the church, is Menai Anglican?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. And so, I just decided to get really invested in the Generator stuff and in the student squad stuff and in my Bible study stuff. And I was really super stoked that I did, because I ended up building some brilliant friendships that will not end, that have carried through to being here.
That will not end.
That will not end.
I also just feel like you were on fire for Jesus. Like it was really cool.
True.
Like I think it was really cool to see how you had kind of changed your attitude, not only to the people around you, but also like you're like, no, like God has put me here, like I'm gonna do what I'm called to do. Like it was really epic to see, and it was a noticeable thing. Like I can remember seeing that kind of play out
in the evidence of that.
The evidence
Good,
under primary.
So you feel like, do you feel like at that time that we're talking about right now, you took like real responsibility for your faith?
Yeah, I think so. I guess I just kind of went, like I had definitely been a Christian for like a year and a half before then, but I think that was kind of the moment of, I'm just going 100% head in, let's do this, just go for it really. And God's got a plan with it all. Just trust in that plan and trust that if I'm following him, and then it's all going to work out however he plans it. so that was kind of how I went into it, and I definitely felt a lot more on fire for Jesus. And it's always interesting having like a discussion like this with someone who was there at the time, because
Bystander.
well, it's interesting.
She was too busy putting badges on her vest.
But I didn't bring that up, Joel.
You brought it up.
Yeah, I did.
On the other podcast, you brought it up.
Yeah, I did.
But it's just interesting hearing other people how they also viewed it as well. So yeah, and was super on fire, and kind of got partway through. We were partway through year 12.
Yeah.
And we started coming to Soul Revival just as a one-off. I think at the time Katie had already kind of moved over here. Gemma was kind of in the middle, and Jake's family was going here as well.
Yeah, so I had the family connection,
Yeah.
responsibility, you know.
Yeah. And so
Stand the family.
Stand the fam.
but we I knew Ethan through mutual friends, and then like a couple of other guys that we were going to Menai with as well also came along to check it out, who also had mutual friends from LIT camp, which is Camp Youth Works runs. So we were kind of just like, yeah, we'll just come hang out. And then it kind of turned into we came every second week. And we just really enjoyed the community of it. We always felt really welcomed. And I think we'd only been there for like 2 months, and Jared and Haley Springs sat us down and they were like, hey, we know you guys aren't necessarily, may not necessarily become part of the church or anything, but we do church schoolies for the end of year 12, and you guys are in year 12. So we want to invite you guys to come with us. And I was like, whoa, you guys barely know us and you're inviting us on schoolies. It was a big shock.
Wild.
It was so good. It was so cool though. And I remember thinking, this community vibe is really cool. I really love getting to meet all these people who are older and younger than me. It's really cool. And that wasn't quite the case at Menai. So I wanted to, I was still full head of heels Jesus, and I kind of wanted to bring a little bit of that to Menai if we could. And I remember going and talking to one of our youth coordinators at the time, and I was just like, hey, and as I said, I already had friends who had graduated and were kind of a little bit involved in their young adults community. I was like, hey, it'd be really cool if we got to meet the other young adults in the church, because we're coming out of school and we kind of don't really know anyone outside of our year group and our youth leaders. And the few times that I'd been at church was kind of we stuck in our year group, we talked to our youth leaders, or I broke the boundaries and I went and talked to the people who were in the grade above. That's kind of how it was. And the discussion was yeah, we've been kind of trying to think about how we can do something, but it's really hard just with certain age things and that sort of thing to actually, we haven't been able to figure out something, to be able to do something that, everyone's going to enjoy doing.
Safe ministry stuff, that was kind of the excuse.
Yeah. And it was kind of a bit of a letdown, because it kind of didn't seem like that actually wanted to happen. So I think with that, I kind of then started looking at moving to Soul Revival permanently, and ended up doing that. And I'm very glad that I did. I still have great friends who go to Menai, and friends that have moved on to other churches, as happens. But yeah, I was super stoked that I did, and then came and did youth ministry and got heaps involved in late night, and
You are very involved.
Yes. And just doing Berean internship and things, pretty much
Berean is our internal training course.
Yes,
just to
sorry.
explain again,
Thank
if anyone's
you.
listening. Yeah,
Yes.
that's all right.
And pretty much once I graduated, I actually didn't go on schoolies for either for Menai or for Soul Revival. And I didn't do my schoolies with friends from school. So when everyone went on schoolies, I think they all went from the same week. And so I was the only person my age at church, which was great because it made me make friends with other people. So it was in like that 2-week span. I remember specifically myself and Beck Wall became really, really good friends because we just hung out heaps because I didn't really have anyone else to hang out with, and she was super lovely and welcoming. And like got to know like Cassie and Manda better as well. So that was really cool, and that was kind of a good adjustment into being at Soul Revival. And then I went to uni and was still very on fire for Jesus. And I didn't get involved in university ministry, but was always open about being a Christian, and actually had like a couple of interesting conversations with university people. At the time I was doing what was I doing? I started with a physics degree. I've had many changes. So started with a physics degree. So you always get some really interesting conversations with people who do physics, and they're like, how can you be a Christian and also study physics? And I'm like, well, you look at I'm not going to go into that because it's all very long and confusing. And it's a very long thing. But basically I just go, well, something had to cause the creation of the universe. Creation
of
the universe.
The universe. Yeah, we'll finish the sentence for you.
Thank you.
Got you.
So yeah, and just kind of going through uni and taking time out of uni, and then going back to uni, and then working. Have it's been a crazy ride. It always is a crazy ride. It'll continue to be a crazy ride. But you know, have just kept trying to stay faithful and do what God would want me to do, and to love others how God loves us. And that's kind of how I've tried to go about everything that I do. And it's not always perfect. And we all fall short at several times.
Many times.
Yes.
Many times.
But I think one thing that I've always done is I've never been shy to tell someone that I'm a Christian, which has been really good, especially in like mostly in my work environment. It's the retail environment I work in, which is JB Hi-Fi, big tech company.
Shut up.
Yep. But it's not really, you know.
You've done it again.
Sorry. JB, you've done it again. Just free advertising.
Yep.
Yeah, most people would not consider it a particularly Christian environment. Which is kind of why it's great to be a Christian in that environment. It is a struggle at times, but I've also had some really interesting conversations, and at the same time have also gotten the schoolyard payouts. Like there was one time I went to lead on church schoolies, and I had just gotten the job, and I wasn't going to be there for a week, and a couple of the guys were like, oh, why aren't you going to be there? I'm like, oh, I'm going to lead on church schoolies. And they're like, sorry, what? I'm like, church schoolies, I'm going to lead. And they're like churches? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, they just laughed at me, and for like a good year I couldn't get rid of that, and I was totally okay with that. So yeah, like there's very funny things that come out of it, but also some really good conversations. So yeah.
The question that I was going to ask you was that when you were first thinking about coming to Soul Revival, one of the things was when some people that were that were older than you came up to chat to you about schoolies. Was that something you were looking for in your life at the time, do you think?
No. Define which part I was looking for.
Because you went back to Menai and sorry, I don't want to sound disparaging towards Menai Church either, but it sounded like that you went and asked to be able to do that, or that why aren't we doing it more? And they weren't as there wasn't that desire to do that.
Yeah.
Was that something that was in a desire within you, do you think, to be seeing older Christians and knowing, well, how do I need to, what is one way that I can grow up?
I think unknowingly, yes. I have always been quite my parents have always said I've been quite mature for my age. My sister's 6 years older, for reference. And so when she was going through her HSC, like going through year 11 and 12, looking at university applications, I was like 11 or 12 years old. And I started looking at what I was going to be doing at uni.
Pass me a copy of that form.
Pretty much. That was it. And like I had been planning it for years out. And so I had always been quite mature. I always got along quite well with people older than me. So not just my sister's friends, but even doing like a lot of the music things that I did at school, I was doing them, I think it was like year 7, I was doing stage crew, and it was the most fun time I've ever had. And part of it was because I was doing it with all these people who were in years above me. Like I ended up becoming really good friends with a couple of people who were a couple of years above me. And then as they got older and filed out and we got new people in, like I ended up having the entire Fox family come through stage crew, who is a family from church, and have continued being really good friends with them as well. It's been very funny watching them all go through stage crew and then all growing up.
Yep.
And yeah, so I think unknowingly that was something that I kind of always wanted, because I just always got along well with people of different ages.
What do you think that was though? There's something in your childhood that kind of made you think, I just need to grow up quicker.
Well, yeah, as I said, like having an older sister kind of made me, I think, grow up a bit quicker. Having all of that in the front of I wish I could say it was in the back of my mind, but it wasn't. It was in the front of my mind. But also my parents had, so I'm going to out how nerdy my family is.
We're all friends here.
My whole family plays Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep, you did it.
Yep. No. Play Dungeons and Dragons to the point where they went to conventions. They ran their own conventions.
Wow.
And my parents met at a Dungeons and Dragons convention.
That's actually very wholesome.
Yeah.
That's really wholesome.
Like my sister and I were doomed for nerdiness.
It's just you and your sister?
Yeah, just me and my sister. So yeah, we were doomed from the start. And so we kind of grew up, more so my sister than me, but because my sister's the oldest out of all of our cousins on one side of the family, and oldest out of like any of the family friends' kids as well. Not that there ended up being a heap of them. And then I was still like the second oldest, but the rest of them started kind of coming after me. So we grew up around a lot of adults. I think my earliest memory is my dad was being the game master for a game they were hosting at their place. I was about 3 years old. My sister had already been sent to bed, but I could stay up late. I could help Dad run the game. By helping Dad run the game, it was I fiddled with his dice whenever he wasn't using them, and then I fell asleep. That was my helping. But yeah, so I think it's because I spent so much time around all these adults growing up, that I learned how to interact with older people at a very young age. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of followed me through. And now I really enjoy being friends. Like, Ange is one of my closest friends, for example.
On the podcast previously.
Yes.
2 episodes ago.
Yes, yep. That's what made me think of her.
Plug.
But like she's one of my closest friends now, and I absolutely love that she's one of my closest friends.
Awesome.
Yeah, she's such good quality. I love her to pieces. And then like I've got kids that I'm leading at youth that like there's a couple that both Hudson and Daniel, I've seen them go through year 7 to 10. There's people who've known them for longer, but it's been great. Cool. It's been so good to become better friends with them as they've gotten older. And yeah, Daniel just always is rude in a very loving way.
It sounds like you were very well primed to realize the benefits of intergenerational church. And
Yeah.
that's something that we really like to talk about here at
Yeah.
Soul Revival. If you are interested, check out the Shock Absorber podcast, guys.
Nice plug. Good
How
plug.
many plugs in the last 5 minutes?
Just
just
do
a
whatever.
couple.
No, it's good. It's good quality.
I'm a pro.
Yeah. You are a pro.
And I find that really encouraging about you. And I think that's
Yeah.
really cool because it probably took me longer than it did yourself to be able to figure that out. I think I was a little bit too self-centered to figure that out. It was more like, I just want to hang out with my friends. But then what I was realizing was by hanging out with my friends, but then having leaders that were older than me at youth group. And then as I got older was like, oh, they were actually doing intergenerational ministry and I really enjoyed it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. Gemma, any other reflections you'd like to share on your friendship with Alhana and how she's come along? Because I love talking about turning points. That's the thing. Like you've spoken a few of them. I just wonder if you've got any.
Oh, I think definitely like transitioning from high school to like young adulthood like together has been really cool, and I think it's been exciting that God has kind of I guess placed us in the same church after we both moved from one church to another. And I think it's really cool that we both do youth ministry together and like we've kind of been able to watch each other grow. And I was just thinking about when you were kind of chatting about how you wanted a young adult scene to kind of start at Menai or some interaction. Like I kind of think one of the things that happens in a lot of youth groups, I was just thinking about this, is that and with a lot of ministry, sometimes it can be like, okay, well, what happens after this ministry is finished? So what happens after youth group is finished? What's next? But I feel like what's really unique about Soulies, and one of the things I really love, is that it's not really a what's next. It's kind of a like, well, let's just keep going and let's just keep being lifelong friends and doing ministry and serving together. And you might be in youth for that, or you might be in late night, or you might be in kids. It doesn't really matter. But we're kind of all doing this together, and it's not really like there's a next step or a moving away phase when you move out of youth or kids or whatever. Like it's really a beautiful thing. And I was just thinking about how like that's been really cool for us to kind of watch as youth leaders. I think we didn't necessarily experience it from school, like we didn't go here when we were in high school, but I think coming here and being youth leaders, like we've been leading these really beautiful girls that are like in year 9 now. We've just seen some year 10s go out, but some year 9s that we've kind of had from the very start. It's like, well, next year we'll get to watch them kind of come into late 9. It's not really an end, like that's not really a finished product, but it's like a really lovely friendship that's just going to keep growing.
It's not based on their age.
That's right.
It's based on just, well, yeah, you are getting older, but it's based on like, it's just a natural progression.
Yeah, but it's like our relationship is just going to keep growing, and it's not, there's not an end date on that relationship, which is what I think is really, really lovely.
And I think what you're talking about is a legacy of the homogeneous unit principle, which so many churches have adopted, is that it's just you segment the church into different age groups a lot of the time, or other characteristics. But I think that's where there seems to be, I mean, I'm going to plug it again, but on the Shock Absorber with our children's pastor, Tim Billhartz, he talked about every time there's that transition that you're talking about, Gemma, there's a real drop off of people that start going to church, whatever age it is, because there's no natural, that natural progression, or I'm trying to think of a better word to that, but there's no, because it's not about making the relationships the really important thing. It's about, oh, you've moved to this, or this is the next important thing that you need to do. It's not keeping the relationships constant.
That's right.
And especially in that time frame that it happens, like when we were going through that move between churches and, you know, coming out of high school, going into uni or full-time work or whatever it is you end up doing is such a massive change.
It is.
And having those relationships, like there is probably a decent chance if I didn't have those relationships that I very well could have fallen away from church. And I think that is a possibility with a lot of people, which is really unfortunate that is the case, but unfortunately that is. And so, yeah, like I think it's just been so important. Yeah.
I can see how much you value it, which is really cool.
Yeah.
We're about to run out of time, I think, on the camera.
On the clock.
On the clock. I'd love to keep chatting, but anything else you'd like to share before we wrap it up there, Alhana?
I think one thing that I have learned and I keep getting reminded of is that God's plan is not always what you expect the plan to be, and you're probably going to change from whatever you intended. And the reason I say this is I intended on doing engineering all through like year 11 and 12, and then freaked out. And I was like, no, I'm just going to drop it all the way back and I'm going to do physics. I started a physics degree, did 6 months, did social work for 6 months, didn't go to uni for a year, did exercise science for 6 months, did random stuff for 6 months, did maths teaching for almost a year, and we're now at this point and I've just gone to full-time work. And so I'm considering staying that way, but who knows? And I think one of the biggest things that I've just had to remember is that God has a plan, and no matter the choice you make, you're going to be on that path.
Get you there,
Yeah. So it's all convoluted and crazy and not knowing where it's going to end up. And like, in all honesty, the biggest constant that I have is that God loves me and God loves us.
Yes.
And that's really what I need to focus on, and everything else will come from that.
Yeah. That's really cool. It's always funny when you're like, oh, why isn't this happening?
Yeah.
And then you look back on it, like maybe it's even 5 years later, and you're like, oh, that's what God was doing.
That's why
that's
that
so
happened.
good to just have something that's like always a constant. And I think that's such a beautiful thing about faith and Christianity. And I feel like it's been really evident in your story, and it's been really cool to hear about it.
Yeah. It's fantastic. Thank you so much.
That's okay.
Thank you for coming on
was
the
epic.
Chip Lunch
That's
podcast. It was
okay.
really cool.
Thank you for having me.
That's
It's
all right.
been heaps of fun.
That's good.
It is, and I do love the host banter,
The host wars.
The host wars. I do love being a part of that. I've had it through church recordings. I've had it through this, and I love it.
great.
But you're both great hosts. So thank you for having me.
Stop it.
Stop it. You're embarrassing us.
Great.
That's such a dorky way to finish
Yeah.
after like such a really
Well, my
deep
hair's
chat.
going the same color. My face is going the same color as your hair.
I mean, we're talking dorky ways to finish. You got the person.
Have you got a Dungeons and Dragons way to finish the podcast? I feel like it's going to like an old. Hey.
All I'm
or
thinking
something.
is some big evil creature has just destroyed the entire dimension, and that's how we should finish.
Goodness me. Well,
sounds really good.
become a Christian, guys, if you're not, because that's what's going to
Yeah.
happen.
That's it.
Thanks, Gemma. Thanks for your time.
Oh, anytime.
Thanks,
Anytime,
Alhana.
Joel.
It was
That's
really
okay.
cool. Thank you very much. You want to
Thank
finish
you.
with it one way?
Yeah.
Wrap it up?
One way, guys.